Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar called Salesforce User Training Best Practices as part of Change Management. My name is Diana Hurst. I'm with CRM Science, and we're really thankful that you're spending time with us today and taking time out of your busy day. We have a really great presentation lined up for you, but I want to start by introducing CRM Science for those of you who don't know us. We are a Salesforce Gold Consulting Partner. We are also a Salesforce.org Impact Partner, and we are also a PDO, which stands for Product Development Outsourcer. And so over the past years, we've had the honor to work with many clients, mostly in the financial services space. We work with a lot of nonprofit organizations, and we also work with healthcare and life sciences, just a few examples of the industries that we're particularly specialized in. And so we are a full service Salesforce consulting firm and work really across the Salesforce platform. And so together with our clients have solved some really interesting and complex business challenges through innovative uses of Salesforce. So on the next slide, I have some very light housekeeping. Everyone is muted today because we have a lot of people on the call, but we do encourage you to ask questions, and you can do that by entering your question into the Q&A feature here in Zoom, and we'll take time towards the end of this webinar to answer as many questions as possible. And if we don't get to your question, we can always reach back out to you after this webinar. And then lastly, we are recording this session, so you can expect a link to the replay later today or tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. And with that, I think we're ready to kick things off. And Leah, your turn.
Thank you so much, Diana. And thank you all for tuning in today as I discuss the very important topic of user training in regards to change management on the Salesforce platform. My name is Leah Witten. I am a project manager for CRM Science. I've been with the company for about 4 years now. And I have the pleasure of working with many interesting clients who are building out applications for the Salesforce AppExchange. So I project manage for our PDO department here at the organization. I'm really excited today to share some of my experiences and best practices for training users on the Salesforce platform. Today, I'll talk a little bit about a few different topics. First being change management, user adoption, and then I will lead right into some best practices around training users and creating training program strategies for facilitating successful change management. First off, I want everybody to take a poll for us. You should see a pop-up on your screen to be able to answer the poll soon. The question being, have you ever been part of a user training program before? You can either answer yes as an organizer or trainer, yes as a trainee, or no, not at all.
Yep, so everyone should see a pop-up on their screen with the question and the answer. Take a moment to answer through the poll feature, and we'll see the results very shortly in just a couple of seconds. Looks like a lot of people have already answered. I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. All right, great. So I'm ending the poll, and we should see the results pop up on our screens.
Excellent. So it looks like the majority of people on the call today have been a part of a training program as an organizer or a trainer. And that's great. And even for the people who haven't, this should be an interesting topic and webinar for you to kind of gather some additional insight or suggestions on how users best receive training and how change management can really be facilitated well at an organization. So change management is defined as the management of change and development within a business or similar organization. I'm sure most of you on this call are familiar with the concept of change management. And honestly, the definition itself seems pretty self-explanatory, right? But what might not be so self-explanatory is how to successfully achieve change management. Um, Organizations of all shapes and sizes have to go through change at some point in time, whether that be a large technology rollout, such as a Salesforce purchase and implementation, or something on the smaller side, whether it be just implementing a new AppExchange application that you have to work with, that you're expecting your users to work with within your Salesforce org. Um, there are a lot of different ways to facilitate change management, and it can be, not an extremely easy challenge. As we all know, most people, well, some people at organizations can be resistant to change. A lot of employees, once they get comfortable in their positions and their roles, have their ways of doing things every day and don't necessarily want to welcome a new huge adjustment to their day-to-day lives from a work perspective, right? That's not everyone. Some people really love change, but for those who don't, or those who kind of struggle with it, having a really solid strategy going into change, any sort of change, is really important and crucial to the outcome of what you'll see from your implementation. Couple things to think about are, when creating your strategy is, how am I going to execute my plan? Do I have an appropriate amount of training in place, a training plan in place to be able to facilitate knowledge transfer to my employees? How am I going to keep them motivated throughout the change? And obviously, very importantly, how am I going to track whether my change has been successful or whether it will continue to be successful in the future? So we'll talk about some of those strategies today, and some of the best practices that I've put together will kind of help give some color to this topic. When it comes to a major technology purchase and rollout, the first thing on many organizations' mind is, how am I going to achieve a return on my investment? When it comes to Salesforce, it can be a very large investment for a company, not just from a financial perspective, which I'm sure most of us know that is one of the aspects to consider, of course. But when you're thinking about investments, you're also thinking, all right, I need time and I need resources to put into this initiative. So a couple of things that really feed into whether or not you're going to have a higher ROI is how you handle your change management, surprise, surprise, and how well you've approached user adoption, or having your users or your company widely accept the new technology that you're introducing. There are a few different things that I think are really important to lead up to achieving that goal of a high ROI. The first being creating a group of champions for the technology rollout. And when I say champions, I'm referring to some people in an executive position or a leadership position or even management at the company who are completely and entirely bought into the concept and the idea that this change is going to be impactful and important for the organization. As users or employees, if you don't have people in the leadership position who are championing and expressing their excitement for the change, oftentimes you're not going to be able to get as much motivation out of those users or employees because they need that kind of driving force to motivate themselves to want to learn and accept this new change. Secondly, you definitely need to figure out what KPIs you're trying to measure before you enter into the initiative. Identifying some key ways to measure your results or to know what goals to strive for are crucial to the impact and the outcome of what the change will bring. And of course, you'll need a way to illustrate those results. So thinking about what types of reports and dashboards you might be able to collect or display to reference back to how well things are going can really affect whether you're able to address some of the challenges that might arise, or kind of shift your goals if necessary. So I've talked a little bit about change management and user adoption and what those things mean to an organization. But one of the things that's important, and what I'll mostly be focusing on today, is the driver, the initial driver of a successful change management experience, which is training and training programs for your users. I listed out a few different things that are some different examples of why training programs are important. Some of those things include being able to measure, like I mentioned before, measuring the actual user adoption and the impact that the change is having on the organization. If you make a plan up front for how you want to coordinate and carry out your training program, you should also plan in ways to measure the adoption and how the change is actually impacting everything. You'll also be able to think about, as you create the training program, you'll think about your employees, right? You're going to think about how can I centralize this experience around my users and make sure that they have the best experience, which will lead to them adopting the technology at a faster or more effective rate. You'll also be able to anticipate and respond to challenges that might arise throughout your rollout. Training programs are a great way to plan out how you're going to present the technology and present the information to employees. But they're also a great way to make sure you're being agile about it, right? To be able to shift and address challenges that might arise throughout the program. It's important to plan for that. It's important to plan to be able to be quick on your feet and adjust as necessary, but have a major plan for the overall course and objective. And through training programs, you can often mitigate some of the negative risks of change, which could be things like not achieving that ROI that you're really set out to get from that large investment you're making in this new technology. All right, time for one more poll. The question this time is, how confident are you that your company currently handles change management with an effective plan? And the key word here is effective. You're either very confident, moderately confident, not confident, or you have no idea.
All right, everyone should see the poll appear on their screen again. Take a moment to answer it, and we'll share the results in a few moments. All right, I'm going to end the poll and share the results.
All right, so it looks like the majority of people are moderately confident to not confident. And that's honestly not extremely surprising, right? One of the biggest challenges for organizations is to, adequately plan for change. It's easy to introduce the change, but to try and mitigate any of those risks or actually create a strategy around the change isn't typically an easy feat. So hopefully today I'm about to present 5 best practices. So hopefully those will kind of help some of you to understand or help your organization create a more effective plan for a change. Right, so first things first, I want to talk a little bit about setting user training goals. As we all know, you can't really meet a goal if you don't have one to strive for. So setting goals up front for your users and for what you're expecting the outcome of this new initiative to be is extremely important, right? determining some program benchmarks or milestones before you get started is a really great way to kind of gauge how you're progressing throughout the program. Some examples of goals are SMART goals. I know we've probably all heard of the term SMART goals. It's an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Those characteristics are very good characteristics to keep in mind when setting your metrics or identifying what benchmarks or milestones you're trying to reach throughout the program. Making sure that the goals that you set are widely known throughout your organization is probably the most important aspect of setting these goals. Like I mentioned before, if you don't know what to strive for, how are you going to get there? So make sure that the communication is open with your organization or with your team. Set those goals, take input from your users as to what goals they might think should be met or want to meet. But make sure that when you decide on what the goals are and what that set is, or what those metrics are, communicate those to the company. It's a team effort to really learn something as major as rolling out Salesforce, right? So having everyone's buy-in is really the ultimate goal of any training program. And by setting solid goals and achievable goals, then you should be able to witness those results. The next best practice to consider when creating a training program or considering user training are your training tactics. One extremely powerful tool that I've learned since being in the Salesforce ecosystem is this concept of identifying power users. Power users are typically people at the company who are more excited or more interested in technological change. They're people who are good communicators or, people who are eager to share their knowledge or experiences with others on their team. And typically power users are volunteers at the company. They're not necessarily people who you want to assign a role to specifically. It's really a positive outcome when power users are kind of volunteering to be one of those people instead of being voluntold. When you do pick power users or when people volunteer to be power users, it's a good idea to try and get a wide breadth of people from the organization to be those people. So what I mean by that is picking people from various teams or departments within your organization to be the power user or the champion within that team or department. When you pick this group of power users, or when they pick themselves, you're essentially adopting a train the trainer model. The train the trainer model helps to save a lot of time and resources in the long run, because you'll want to take that group of power users and enable those people first to be able to learn and use the tool, the technology. Once you've trained these power users and they feel that they can go share their knowledge with the rest of the company, then you've created an environment where your employees are advocating for the technology as well, right? You have actual users who are going to be using the platform every single day, who have total buy-in and want to help their teammates learn and experience this new technology and embrace the new change. Another tactic is sweetening the deal with incentives. This is one of my personal favorites because who doesn't like to get prizes or get rewarded for the hard work they put in, right? As a user of the Salesforce platform, there are a lot of ways to feel like you're succeeding well, like, right, you're tackling a lot of the tasks that are at hand, or you're using the technology, it's helping you improve your day-to-day experience of your job. You want your users to feel that and feel excited about that. So creating some way to incentivize the learning experience really helps drive that motivation within your teams and your employees. You may be able to gamify the learning experience a little bit by creating some sort of point system for which employees have completed the most or closed out the most tasks this week. Or you maybe even might get more creative and say, all right, here's a challenge for the week. Which team can come to us with the coolest new idea or way or use case to use Salesforce? What's the coolest thing you've learned about the platform? And reward your users for putting in this hard work and for really trying and to accept and embrace the change as they go throughout this training program. Equally as important as your tactics are your materials. So thinking about what training materials you're going to provide to the users and for them to have at their hands to learn from is really key. And everyone here on this call today is very lucky because Salesforce Trailhead is one of the best, in my opinion, training tools out there. Salesforce has put in a lot of time and money into Trailhead, and there is such a wealth of information that it can really be extremely useful, but especially when used in the right way. So I just moved out to Colorado a couple of years ago. And so one of my favorite pastimes now is hiking. But one thing I would never do is set out to a mountain without any idea of what trails I'm going to take to climb to the top of that mountain. That would just be dangerous and probably not the smartest decision in the world. So in the same sense, I want you to think about Trailhead as that mountain, right? There is so much information out there on Trailhead that if you send your users out onto that journey, but don't give them any guidance on what trails they should focus on first, or how to build their foundation of information via those trails, it can really be detrimental to their experience. So you definitely don't want to say, okay, hey, employees, go sign up for Trailhead. It's free, and then learn some stuff and come back. The better approach would be, all right, go sign up for your Trailhead account, and here are 5 trails that I want you to, or modules, or however you want to, however much information you feel your team can handle in a week or however long. Give them an assignment to go complete those trails specifically and help them find their path up to the top of the mountain that you want them to reach. And that can really generate a really great experience with embracing the platform. And a lot of times you'll find that your users will go beyond those trails that you've presented to them to complete, that baseline of trails. They'll want to go and experience and learn more information because that experience is fun. It is gamified, and they can get their hands-on experience that way as well. So lastly, a really, really great material or, asset to have are recorded training sessions. So whether, your power users are presenting information to their team via some kind of presentation, or even, some of your users are walking through a demo of how to create a lead and nurture it and convert it to an opportunity and take that opportunity to a closed deal. Record those sessions, record those demos and walkthroughs, because not only can your users then reference that material again in the future when they maybe, become rusty on a certain topic or forget something that they might have heard before, but you can also give those recorded training sessions to new hires who may have missed the rollout entirely and who have maybe never touched Salesforce before, rather than having to, reinvest more resources to train those individuals. You have recorded sessions on hand that were specific to your company, specific to the use cases you need your employees to learn, but are reusable. Right, so one of the most challenging tasks is in creating a training program is determining the focus and how you're going to organize that training focus. I would say one of the most popular ways of kind of setting up a program's focused is to go with role-based user training. there are, obviously you have different departments using different Salesforce in different ways each day to carry out their day-to-day jobs. So to keep those individuals interested and motivated to learn each use case and the topic at hand, you do want to make training programs specific to each group, right? You'll want to train a set of training topics for your sales team, a different set of training topics for your support team, and another set for your operations team or your implementation team, whoever else might be using it, right? Because while it may be sort of interesting for the sales team to hear how the support team closes tickets, it's really not going to keep their interest for too long, right? Um, you know, Picking topics for the sales team, like lead conversion or task completion, is going to be a lot more interesting and relevant for the users, for your sales users, than it would be for your support team. Now, in the same sense, I do think it's useful for organizations to introduce the wider breadth of the platform to their companies as well. So I don't think you need to hyper focus on the role itself entirely, but I would put that at the forefront of the planning for the program, right? And then potentially have, a higher level, shorter session to introduce the entire platform to the other groups. So support really might be interested in seeing how sales creates a lead, just so they know, what's the general effort that goes in, and how can I be there for the rest of my team if I ever need to maybe put myself in a different role and mindset. Secondly, skill-based user training is something that can kind of be used in combination with role-based training. Skill-based training is thinking more along the lines of, how can I create training materials or training initiatives that are challenging enough for my users to stay interested and to, push the envelope of their learning experience, but not so challenging to where my users just don't feel like they can accomplish what needs to be accomplished. One thing that always needs to be in the back of anyone's mind during training is how can our users stay motivated to continue learning? By focusing on both roles and skills, you'll create kind of a better experience for that user. And maybe to confront that skill-based training, you think about forming some kind of tiered training program, right? So you can think about, beginner or entry level training versus maybe moderate skill level or advanced skill level. And that way you can give your employees or your users kind of a better opportunity to challenge themselves, but again, stay motivated and stay encouraged and feel like they're accomplishing what's being asked of them. You'll also be able to leverage team building activities by thinking about the program's focus. Training doesn't always have to be this, boring idea or this cumbersome idea of having your users just completely make a change and learn an entirely new tool, right? It can be exciting. It can be a way for you to build your team up. If you create the right environments, right? If you're thinking about the teams who will be learning specific information, or if you think about the different skill levels, you're offering different options for people to be able to train and learn the way that they need to learn. You're really encouraging more positivity amongst the team, and hopefully you're creating an environment where the team feels they can communicate openly and ask questions and bring ideas to the table, and really just create an even more positive experience when introducing this new and exciting new technology that's going to help drive business success. And last but certainly not least, the fifth best practice here is to measure your initiative's results. I mentioned reporting and dashboards a little bit earlier, but really through measuring results, you're bringing all of these best practices full circle, right? Our first best practice was to set SMART goals. if you've set the right goals and you know what goals you're striving for, you're able to then take take measurements along the way and generate those into reports and dashboards. And luckily with Salesforce, it's one of the most powerful reporting tools that there is. So being able to collect that information within your org and even start seeing the power of the tool just through your training program is an added bonus on getting back that ROI, right? So you can also collect user satisfaction surveys. There are tons of ways to, to send out surveys to your team. I think Google Forms is a really easy solution to getting some of that feedback along the way. But if you're sending out these satisfaction surveys, one tip might be to just allow it to be anonymous, right? If you want that open and honest feedback from your user base, and you don't want them to feel like they have to kind of fluff their answers, just give the option of the survey being anonymous, and you'll gather some really, really honest feedback about whether your training program is working, how they're feeling about actually receiving the knowledge, and how successful they feel the training program is going. And that way you can use those results to adjust if needed, or, kind of modify the way that you're approaching and navigating the change. And of course, through measuring results and through collecting these reports and surveys, you're able to measure whether you're going to have long-term adoption. Now that's obviously the ultimate goal for everyone, right? Is to make sure that this adoption is not short-lived. You want it to really be ingrained within your business and your business processes, so that hopefully and ideally it becomes the central driver of your business, right? Salesforce fulfills all of its duties, and you get a high ROI on your investment, and the company shines. All right, so I have collected and listed out a few resources here for you today. I actually wrote a blog post on this topic, which I've linked out to here. And there's also a link to how to write SMART goals that I've been talking about. Again, I think, being able to have the right goals and being able to measure those goals is really crucial to a successful facilitation of change at an organization. I've also listed out a few Trailhead modules that are great for new Salesforce users. These are just a few examples. There's tons out there, but searching along throughout Trailhead to find the right modules to present to your team, again, is a really crucial aspect of planning out how you're going to provide that guidance for learning. And a few resources at the bottom here, things like Trailhead Live and the Trailblazer community. There are a lot of awesome resources out there on the internet for you to reference when it comes to Trailhead and just being part of the Salesforce community. So just know that your organization is obviously not the first or the last to be putting together any kind of program to introduce and implement Salesforce at an organization of any size. So the community is awesome to lean on, and I highly encourage that you do so if needing any assistance in creating or boosting your change management or training experiences. So that just about does it for today's topic. And I'll hand it back over to Diana for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. That was really awesome. So everyone on the call, we're going to be taking your questions now. So if you have any, type them into the Q&A, and we'll take a moment to go over it. We have a couple of questions already. And the first one being, what is the number one mistake that most clients make at the start of training that negatively impacts overall training the most?
That is a great question. I would say, from the experiences that I've seen, I think that the biggest mistake an organization can make is putting too much on the plate or putting too much on the plate of your users up front, right? Change can be scary. And if it's not approached in the right way, it can be very difficult to rein that experience back in. If you kick things off, making it seem as though it's an unattainable goal, learning such a huge change, right? You want to make sure the user feels that it is attainable, and there are ways, smaller milestones or smaller goals for the user to strive for, rather than just introducing the topic as something that's going to completely change their job and the way that they work every single day. It's better to kind of throttle the experience, if you will, or guide it. It might be a better term, up front. And you can do so by really just thinking through all of the steps of how the training is going to proceed, right? Coming up with that plan and that adequate strategy up front, and making sure you present it to your employees in the right way, so that they're not overwhelmed and they feel supported. That's probably the most major thing.
Great. Another question we got is, how do I identify my power users?
Another great question. So power users, it's better, as I mentioned before, I think power users should be volunteers when possible. But obviously it's not the easiest thing to identify those people all the time. Even when you have a bunch of volunteers, it's possible they could not be the best volunteers for the job, right? So one thing I suggest is kind of putting it into the hands of the manager of each team, and kind of having the manager either talk to those people about the option and ask them if they, ask people on their team to be volunteers if they'd be interested. Because managers or, leaders of the smaller group typically know who is really good at, and helping share their knowledge or helping facilitate information amongst the team. And that the managers or the leaders of each team can kind of help decide who might be the best candidate for that, and approach it that way, right? You still want that person to be willing to do the job. You don't necessarily want to assign it to them. You kind of want to drive that excitement about it. But at the same time, it can be kind of hard to identify who those people should be. So typically, if you put it on a smaller scale and ask the managers of that team, they can help you to look out for those people and pick out who they might be.
Yep, makes sense. And then someone is wondering how Salesforce certifications factor into all of this in terms of user training and change management in general versus, for example, Trailhead modules.
Yeah, certifications are another one of those amazing tools from Salesforce, and they can definitely factor into training if, it depends on the level of experience you're expecting from the user. But if there are roles at your company that would kind of require or encourage the use of a deeper understanding of a certain topic or area of the platform, certifications can definitely be a great way to encourage additional learning, right? A deeper understanding. And I would say that a great way to encourage users to even think about certifications is to leverage that some kind of incentive program, right? Whether that's getting some kind of reward for each certification that's achieved, or really just encouraging that deeper understanding of each topic. It can really be helpful to facilitate the change. It can also create, if people are actually interested in getting the certifications, it can really create a brand new power user for you. So, help or encouraging certifications is great. I think that is an added bonus if you can work that into your training plan.
Right. Thank you for that. It looks like those were the questions. And so I think we are ready to hold on, there's one more question coming in. Let me look at this one. How can you still be successful with change management when it must go forward, but you cannot get enough higher up sponsorship or attention? Ooh, complicated.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question because the higher ups do have a lot of impact on it. But one way to do that is to encourage encourage the change on a smaller scale, right? You might not have that full buy-in or presence of leadership kind of urging the change along. But what you I think honestly a good thing to do at that point is to lean more on some kind of incentives. It doesn't necessarily have to be a financial incentive, right? You don't have to be giving people gift cards necessarily for their efforts, but there are ways within the team you can say, okay, whoever scores the most points, whatever that may look like for your team, you get to have a half day or something like that, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily a financial investment or a financial incentive. Sometimes it can be just a shout out within the company or things of that nature. But there are ways to push the change along even when you don't have those leaders fully bought in. Yeah, it definitely can present more of a challenge, but it honestly just requires getting a little bit more creative with how you're going to encourage the learning.
Great. All right. I think we are ready to wrap up. Thank you, Leah, for sharing your insights and your best practices. Thank you to the audience, to everyone who was here. If you want to learn more about user training or change management, or if you would like to chat with us about something you are working on in your Salesforce org at the moment, feel free to reach out. I've included our contact information on this slide. We are happy to talk to you about anything Salesforce. And like I said earlier, you will all receive the recording of this webinar as well as a PDF of the slides. So look out for that in your inboxes. And so for now, thank you for spending time with us today. And we hope to see you again on one of our webinars in the future. Thanks so much, everyone.